And we're live to review Do or Die. Over to Jeff.
Hello. This is Homicide Life on the Street, a review of Season 7, Episode 14, which is called A Case of Do or Die. It was written by Anya Epstein and directed by Tim Van Patten, and originally aired February 12th, 1999. I'm going to read a brief recap and then turn it over to Ben for his thoughts before I give mine. So, Ballard and Bayless are called to the scene of the mysterious death of a woman whose body is found at the bottom of a 40-foot cliff. The victim was to be married the following morning. The detectives work to determine whether the death was accidental or intentional. Meanwhile, Shepard and Mike begin investigating the death of a movie patron whose body was discovered after the show ended and the theater cleared out. Mike mentions to Shepard that his sister is about to have a baby, which means G is about to become a grandfather. Their investigation reveals that the movie patron was regularly loud and obnoxious and thus bad for business. When an overdose of a sedative is found in his bloodstream, the detectives question the theater owner, who was currently in litigation with the victim. And eventually he basically confesses. Unfortunately for Ballard and Bayless, their case remains unsolved. So, what'd you think, Ben?
Oh, I think that was a short recap. I like the line from Giardello, Senior G. Am I hearing correctly, detectives? Are you trying to close a case by analysing a painting? So I quite like that.
Mm-hmm.
I initially wrote down NI break, but it's hard to work. It's hard to like tag that with a particular function thing. But and then I've just written stuff where I've I like the nice scene between the two G's about him. Where it initially shows that he's unhappy at getting old, but he's happy to be a grandfather. And then Bayless, I like to know that you do not know is the beginning of wisdom. That's true. And then there was something weird at the end. It said Michael Blowen as Michael Blowen. Do you know anything more about that, Jeff?
I noticed that too. I don't know. So I don't know. It made me wonder: is the real guy? Was he actually somebody that was doing that in movie theaters, and they decided to put him in an episode? I don't know. Don't know the background on that. It's not the first time we've had somebody play themselves on Homicide. I can say that because in the episode where Munch's ex-wife, I believe it was her mother, died, and they had the funeral, and one of the people that came to it was an author, and it was the actual author playing himself. Forgot his name right now, but wasn't anybody I'd heard of, but apparently some people had.
You got G there trying to, shall we say, make his presence felt, and Bayless standing up to him. The only other thing that sort of came to mind about this episode was just a libertarian thing of why can't he just ban the guy from the theatre? And then why does he have to be involved in the involuntary trade? But oh well, we can't talk about that too much because we might have the video taken down.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not joking. I mean, the way things are going. You there, Jeff? I mean,
yeah.
But yeah, so because I think that came in because of like that was part of the what is it? The 1965 Civil Rights Act.
What is?
Was that thing about why can't he ban someone from the theatre?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I mean, I was
I
wondering.
don't know.
Okay, fair enough. Right, fair enough.
I think I've told you before not to ask me legal questions. I don't know anything about. I'm not a lawyer
Right. Well,
or law expert in any way.
besides that, I thought all the nobody was a bad act. Nobody was a bad show player. Nobody ruined it for their acting. All the small parts were okay. Nothing really happened. I suppose there was a good balance between the stories in that there was the one case that wasn't closed. That was balanced by the slightly humorous one that was closed with what is it, the Michael Blowen one in the cinema, and then also there was the stuff between the two Gs showing their arc over this season, where at the beginning of the season there was a little bit of strife between the two Gs not understanding each other, and Junior G thinking. So maybe we could talk about that, Jeff. What do you think about their relationship now it's changed?
Well, I mean, I think on account of working together, they may have warmed a little bit, that just from the fact that they were separated for a while, that, they didn't really talk much, it sounds like, from what they've said. So you had the picture of the board there, it makes me notice, I think, even though the way we're watching them in the right order as far as the way or the DVD and the production or anything, but it makes me think that the dates were slightly out of order because we had previous episodes where it obviously took place in the new year.
Yeah.
Because they had less cases, but then this one they were just starting 99, so it looks like this was intended to be right at the beginning of January, even though it wasn't actually aired until later.
When they had that thing, where he offered them jujubes, that was almost like, I would think, are the writers trying to be Seinfeldian there? Because that's the sort of thing they would do.
But with you bringing up whatever it is you brought up, because now I forgot it already. But it's a good opportunity for me to mention the overwhelming question I had watching this, and it's not the first one, but it's just sort of built up. Is I'm like, in the beginning when Mike Giardello was introduced, and then they made him the FBI liaison to the homicide department. It made sense, like the cases he was involved in, because they were things that, there was jurisdiction where it's turned over to federal stuff. But the last few cases he's worked, I can't understand why he's been working them, because he wasn't supposed to be just like a regular homicide detective. He was only supposed to. He's still an FBI guy, so I'm not really sure why. Obviously they just decided to utilize him on the show as just any other detective, but there's not really any explanation for why he started doing that. So,
you mean
that was one of my few notes I wrote down is, why is Mike working cases that have nothing to do with the FBI?
Well, maybe they're more efficient than in real life, where he's not allowed to. You just sit there. Oh, can't do anything unless it involves the FBI. Just got to sit here.
Well, I mean, there'll be further developments on that. I'll say that, with his job and with his relationship with G, that will come, in the remaining episodes. And I don't want to really get into that and spoil anything, but I'll say that my question may sort of be answered, but not in a very satisfying way, I think. But anyway, I'm viewing this as if I haven't seen the rest, and I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of trying to review it with a fresh perspective as much as I can.
Jeff, did you have a dog growing up?
No.
Oh, I was just wondering, if you did have a dog, would you like a dog like this?
No,
Okay, fair enough.
I don't. I don't want a dog, and I don't. I never wanted a dog.
Maybe it's like the dog would have a better
And
life
and
than me.
and anytime you want to move on to another picture, that'll be fine too.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
What's weird is that he puts these up and he puts like 4 of them up in a row, and it's like they're all gonna get seen, but it's like not really thinking straight.
Oh yeah, the poster thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's one of the. There's a lot of good details. You know, when I've talked about what's good about Homicide, one of the things I like is they're not afraid to have a lot of realistic details that don't necessarily point to something. You know, it's not like it's a mystery where we're trying to give you clues. A lot of times it's not. It's just people acting how people act, and so I like that. Um, so yeah, you mentioned before that we've got one case that's not solved, and then another case that's solved really quickly. And again, that seems kind of true to life, in that they're kind of making the point again in this episode that sometimes the cases where nobody's particularly broken up about the guy dying.
yeah,
Because he was obnoxious. The people that they couldn't stand him. Not not that they maybe would say he deserved to die, but they're not exactly sad that he's not going to be in the theater anymore. But they figure that one out really quickly. And meanwhile, the woman who was, by all accounts, missed by everybody who knew her. That's the one that they can't figure out. So again, it's kind of that recurring theme of Homicide, is that you know things don't always turn out how you would want, or um, and you've got Bayless there to sort of be the guy who talks about karma and things like that. But there's almost kind of a mocking of that in the way
yeah.
that Homicide works, because it's kind of like, no, things don't balance each other out sometimes. So, um, and you mentioned the scene with the two G's, as you call them. I know we've said many times how good an actor Yaphet Kotto is, but this was another reminder where there's a lot of actors who couldn't quite pull that off in that scene, where he goes from looking like he's about to tell Mike some kind of grave news or whatever, or be mad at him, and then he softens up.
So you got that here. So I sort of caught it where it's like that one where it changes, and then they're always happy of being a grandfather.
Yeah, but and even before that, when he first came in the office, and he's like, "What is he going to tell me?" And he's, he wastes the last possible second he can to reveal that he's talking about her having the baby. So that was really a good performance, and a good scene.
Well, the only thing that would slightly undercut it was the fact that the information was revealed earlier in the episode when they said, "Oh, he's going to be a grandfather."
Well, I mean, but they didn't say it had already happened. He just said that it was going to happen. So
Right.
it wasn't. It was still effective. It probably was more effective that we did have a little bit of information about it, so it didn't just come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
We knew what he was talking about, but it was still effective in the way that he made it seem as if he was going to talk about something else. And the dude that was, another red herring, which is another good thing I like, where we've got the guy who sticks people up, but he wasn't the guy, because he was in a different place sticking somebody else up.
Yeah, sometimes you got in the 1990s, the hair was overly nice. I think his hair is overly nice. It was ridiculous in Diagnosis Murder, but here it's like with these kind of hairstyles, these are high maintenance hairstyles, and you're supposed to be a drug addict.
Well, maybe his drug is hairstyling. I don't know.
Maybe.
But it doesn't look that good to me, so
Yeah.
it's just I don't have the I would say, if anyone's hair is a little too good, it's the cops, not him, because you don't tend to see much mussed up hair with any of the cops.
Yeah,
look like they've just came out of the salon.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, it was even more ridiculous in Diagnosis Murder, where you had like Steve, you had Dick Van Dyke's son, Barry Van Dyke, and his hair was always immaculate. It was just, and you would have it in Star Trek as well, when it was like, Everyone's like the whole ship has just been shaken, and their hair is like all in place.
Well, I mean, we always used to joke. The joke with Star Trek was like, how come they never have seatbelts? Because they're always like, there's a jolt to the Enterprise, and everybody goes flying across across the bridge. Like it
Yeah.
never occurred to them to have seatbelts on the bridge.
One thing I'd say about you could never really accuse Homicide of being overwritten. Well, it's like with some shows, like say the new Doctor Who, they definitely overwrite the dialogue, where they try too hard with the dialogue, and it seems artificial. And it's
You mean like try to fit too much in it? You mean?
yeah, it's just where it's not where the writers are trying to be too clever, and it doesn't sound natural.
Yeah. Right, and this goes back to what I said about the little details of things that it's Homicide is not a mystery show. No, there can be episodes that have suspense for sure, but it's not presented like, okay, pay attention for clues.
Hmm.
And it's not presented as we've discussed many times, including last week. It's not presented as try to get an agenda across, and it's not presented as like try to get as much information as we possibly can get in this short period of time. So I would say Law and Order is much wordier than Homicide is, because especially when the lawyers are talking,
Yeah.
because you have a whole lot of stuff that and real lawyers have said that part's pretty realistic in terms of the way the lawyers talk to each other is pretty much spot on. But because of that, so it's not unrealistic, but it is wordy because the lawyers who know all this case law kind of just dump it. So it's like a verbal dump while they're talking, and you can kind of miss some things because it's like it goes pretty fast.
Yeah, and they're wordy people as well.
Wallace Shawn, the name on the screen. Speaking of Star Trek, he was in several Star Treks. He's one of those guys that has been in a ton of things. A character actor that's known for a lot of different things. Some people best known from The Princess Bride, where because he played the character that kept saying "inconceivable." Star Trek, he played on Deep Space Nine. He played Quark, the Ferengi.
What was his name? Armin Shimmerman.
Oh no, I guess it was a different Ferengi, but he was one of the Ferengi.
Right.
Wallace Shawn is his name, but my brother calls him Annoying Guy. That guy right there on the screen, who played the theater owner. But he's done a lot of parts where he was under makeup and stuff, so you couldn't necessarily tell it was the same guy. But the voice is always that's what gives him away, because his voice sounds a lot the same no matter who he's playing. He was in a movie called My Dinner with Andre, which is just the entire movie is just two guys talking.
Did you go watch that, Jeff?
No. He was also on at least one Seinfeld episode. I think he's been in a ton of stuff, but every time I see him, I always think of my brother's name for him as Annoying Guy. So
it's like, Ben, I like people, but I also like action. So
why are you telling me that?
Well, because I just thought that, like, for like SFPs, like the two preferences, like interest in people and an interest in action. And
okay,
so I just thought that the reason that wouldn't appeal to you, that Dinner with Andre, is because it was like there's not much action in there.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, that's true. I would think that would be true of most people, not just SFPs, but
yeah, and
it
also
would have to be a pretty fascinating conversation to want to sit and listen to two guys talk for an hour.
So it seems that what you seem to be interested in plots is action, people, or mystery.
Well, people covers a lot.
Yeah.
So, I like characters.
Yeah.
I like good dialogue. I like comedy and, things that are funny, which obviously is very subjective. But yes, I do like mysteries. If they're Mysterious. I know it sounds funny to say, but you have things that are called mystery that really aren't. It's kind of
Yeah.
like in video games, you have the ones that are called RPGs for role playing games, but they're really not role playing games because there's no actual role playing involved. um,
But
so uh, a lot of like the stuff my mom likes, like the PBS mystery shows, which were mostly British, most of those I find incredibly boring because they have all this stuff that has nothing to do with. It's not like clues to solve the mystery. It's just all of this needless exposition of characters that aren't interesting.
Right.
Like that Miss Marple, like she's incredibly boring.
I've noticed the change with this character, played by Callie Thorne, Ballard, and that is, I think earlier on she felt intimidated by G, but you can see here that she's sort of standing up more to him.
Yeah, we once again have reminders in this episode about the height differences of certain characters because she towers over him so high. Same thing with Bayless. When you put Ballard and Bayless together, you got
Yeah, here we go.
um, you've got the shortest detective and one of the tallest.
Yeah, I mean, but it looks like Bayliss might be quarter of an inch taller than G, but that would be about it.
Yeah, I remember back when we first talked about it back in the first season, or maybe second, I don't know, somewhere around there. I actually looked up their heights and compared them, but for some reason I'm thinking that Kyle Secor's like 6'4", I think. Was
Yeah.
but I can look again and see that. But
Although here if you look where the chin is, maybe Yaphet Koto's 6'5". I mean here,
well,
looking at
according to Google, Koto is 6'3" and Kyle Secor is 6'4". So yeah, he would be, like you said, about an inch taller, maybe a little less.
But maybe he stood on something. But look, if you look at this angle,
yeah,
it looks.
Well, that's the thing when you have people that so one person might be slouching a bit, might be standing up. You don't know for sure. But.
And we could also say this is type related as well. Like you've got ISFJ doesn't want to dominate, and ESTJ maybe stand a little bit taller. Because it does change though. I mean, just like as you said there, the posture change. There, he's a little bit lower. There's a little bit higher.
Well, that brings up an interesting point or question I can ask you, because you're always asking me on questions, trying to put me on the spot. So it's my chance. So we got a little bit more insight into Ballard in this episode with her talking about her past and leaving her fiance and all that. And so have you gotten any more of a feel for what you think her type is?
Well, yes, that made me think where she didn't. She said she didn't want to explain why, but it's like I think that she doesn't want to feel trapped. That would lead towards she gets more P points for that, like wanting to keep her options open.
But that's perceiver points.
Yes.
Anyone who is unfamiliar, Jen's not implying any particular fetishes or anything.
Yeah. Yeah. But also, like, if you see Enneagram, you could say it's like a bit more of a 7 in her tri-type. But it also might just be age, though. The younger somebody is, maybe even younger guardians, they might want to get married later. Just defer it a little bit. Or it might have something not to do with that, where she might just want to concentrate on her career. And something like that. So she may be a little bit more like a 3, Enneagram type 3 in her tri-type, where it's this thing of like proving herself. And maybe she felt that marriage would be like, she would have to take a step back from her career. and things like that. So just what I gained from that was just a bit more P points, a bit more perceiver points, wanting to keep options open. There's certain types we can rule out for her. Oh yes, when she had the conversation with Bayliss, you know, when he was being a little bit philosophical and sort of like, and he's a censor, but he's looked into these kind of Buddhist things to like help him deal with the stuff he's been through with his abuse. I think that was a big part of it, and also losing Frank, because Frank retiring on, well, moving out of the department on him, and where she seemed to have the reaction to that, like the reaction of a sensing type, of a concrete type, but nothing definitive. So
you just mean in terms of not really wanting to get into philosophical stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. But, you know, there's nothing definitive because it's like that scene was more about the case. And we've never seen her have any like philosophical discussions.
Yeah.
And you saw Munch. He had a little bit of a philosophical discussion, but mainly it was like maybe an opportunity for. I mean, he may have written that himself, Richard Belzer. That stuff about all the old studio heads sort of like struck him down from heaven.
Yeah.
So that may have been added to the script by him.
Yeah,
So,
I remembered that part from this episode, and it's what made me think that Munch was actually the one working on the theater case. But it just shows how little detective work actually needed to be done in that case. That I remembered more Munch talking about it than I did the actual who caught the case.
so that might end up being
it definitely
part
seems
of the film, though.
It definitely seems weird that that they would have sent Mike Giardello, FBI agent, to deal with a guy who may have died of a heart attack in a theater. Like, I mean, are you really suspecting conspiracy there or something? You know.
Well, ESTJs like to be efficient. Probably thinks he wants to keep his son busy. Don't want to look like he's showing favoritism or stuff. But I get your point about the real world.
Yeah, it just seems unlikely. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, he's got people sitting around looking like they're not doing much in the office, and then Giardello and Mike is going to go out to do that. It seems like, you know, where was Lewis? Where was, where was Munch? You know, it's like they have time to talk about it, but they weren't the ones on the case. You know, but anyway.
So, unfortunately, folks, Bradley didn't join us for this episode. So, oh, wait a minute, he might be able to join us, and he might be able to quickly pop into the hangout and tell us what he thought.
Did he? Are you sure he actually saw it?
Well, I'm just going to ask him. Yes, please join and tell us what you thought. Sleepy? Because he said he fell asleep. We are live.
Well, I can. We can stall for time a little bit in case he actually is going to come in, but because I already pretty much said the things I wrote down about it, but I guess I can say that overall, I definitely liked it better than the previous week's episode. But I think I remembered this one, like, I remember it being a little more compelling than it was. So when I saw it, I was like a little bit let down this time because I was just like, it's like the elements that I do like. I like that the main case was unsolved, but the case itself, the characters involved, I guess, the family and stuff like that. None of them were really all that interesting to me. So it was like it was hard for me to. I didn't get emotionally invested. So I was kind of, I guess maybe hoping it would be a little more mysterious. There'd be more like discussion of the details of what happened to them, trying to solve, trying to figure out what occurred. There was some of that, but it's like it didn't really get into it very deeply. So it's the kind of thing that a show like CSI or something like that would have spent a lot more time like examining the physical evidence of it and stuff, obviously. So it kind of felt like it was missing something, but not in a way that made it non-enjoyable. It's just it wasn't as enjoyable as it could be if there was like I guess maybe just kind of one more element added to it. So it was kind of like it was a series of pretty good scenes, but nothing that stood out as really fantastic, other than just again showing off Yaphet Kotto's acting, in the scene with him and Mike. So there's a lot of like little things that were good, but it wasn't like a very powerful episode to me. But it also, it was, which again is probably realistic in that David Simon and others kind of wanted to make things more like this is kind of routine police work, how it is, and those aspects I actually like. So I can't hold it against the show for doing that. But on the other hand, it's like they kind of hurt themselves when they have an episode like we saw last week, where it's like we're trying to race the clock with all this stuff, and we have the ability to just instantaneously make things happen, and then we have this episode that's just kind of bleak. So, it's a better written episode, but it still kind of left me wanting a little bit, I think.
I just realised a sort of irony in this episode, where they blame that guy for ruining the ending to all those films. So I'll just tell you, if you've not seen Psycho, don't watch this episode. If you've not seen Kane, don't watch this episode.
They
Maltese Falcon, Casablanca.
Yeah, I've never seen most of those, but I have had those. I've known those things for a long time because there's so many references to them and all kinds of stuff. That I wouldn't have been surprised anyway, in watching any of those.
But the one I did find out about was the Maltese Falcon. Thank you very much. I'm glad you died.
and that's the funny thing is I've never seen that, but I also don't remember what he said. So I'd have to. I could still maybe be surprised because I don't remember. But the thing about Citizen Kane, I've heard that a lot of times, here's something I can. It's not really that much of a story, but I can say briefly that my younger brother has told the story about how he had, before anybody told him that ending, he had it ruined for him because our mother was watching it on television, and he just happened to walk in the room and see the end first before he'd seen any of the rest of it. So he had that ruined as a kid before even having an opportunity to have ever seen the rest of it.
I'll have to see if Bradley joins or not.
But sometime I might watch it anyway, just to see whether it's it holds up even.
Even
knowing.
What, Casablanca?
No, Citizen Kane.
Oh, yeah, it's not that good. There's lots of good direction in it in terms of like fancy camera moves and things. Lots of like interesting effects with the camera. So, for example, there's one where there's something near to the camera that's in focus, and something far away from the camera that's also in focus at the same time. And apparently, what he did was he covered up half of the camera lens, and so exposed one half of the film with the lens at one distance, and then they shot it again, covered the other side up, and then did the other side, and so it was like combined together from two different lenses, and then you ended up with it's because they didn't have a deep field focus lens. And then there's a good opening shot with the way that it moves around. It's an okay film, but I think Casablanca's better than. And I actually like Casablanca not because of the ending, but because of the subtext running through it. Because actually, the ending doesn't make that much sense.
Yeah, that's one I know my mother likes a lot. So I've seen bits of it, but never all the way through. I have this, one of my many fantasies is, I'll try to watch like every movie ever made. Starting with the earliest. I had started doing this a few years ago, but when somebody else let me use their Netflix password, so I was going on there and seeing like what were the oldest movies they had. So I actually watched something from like 1911 or something that was something about it was actually sci-fi. It was about some dude who builds a spaceship or something to go to the moon.
So, movies in English, Jeff.
Well, it wasn't. There was no anything. I mean, it was before a silent movie, so.
Oh no! What I mean is, like, in that notion that you had of watching all movies ever made, would that include all British movies as well?
Probably not. Probably just, movies at least that were released in America.
Yeah.
They weren't there.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
And like theatrical movies or whatever. But one of the things I've talked about lots of times, but as I wish I could own my own movie theater, and I would do like a Sunday matinee thing, like the old days of show old movies, and like where they would like actually just sort of like make a day of it in the theater where it'd be like they'd show cartoons and then the feature presentation or whatever. There used to be a PBS show called I think it was like Weekend at the Bijou or Night at the Bijou or something like that, and it was like that.
Right. So, have you ever instead of the fantasy of all of the movies, how about maybe all of the 80s movies that got in like that, reached a certain level?
More about watching the really old ones because I haven't seen most of those. I've seen a lot of 80s movies, many of them many times, and in my son's growing up, I showed him a lot of the ones that from my childhood, and watched even a few that I hadn't seen or at least hadn't seen in the theater. Like we saw Gremlins in the theater and together because they re-released that one. Like, the theaters will show like old movies like for a couple of days. Things like anniversaries. The best one was Back to the Future because when they did the on the actual day that the Back to the Future 2 is set in 2015, they showed a triple feature of all three movies.
Yeah, and I remember you went to see that, and I think not just you and your son. Did your brothers go too?
No, it was just the two of us.
Right.
But they had like the concessions were discounted too because if you bought a ticket to that triple feature thing, you got like a wristband, and then when you went to the concession, you got a discount on stuff because it's supposed to be like the old prices or whatever from the 80s.
Ooh.
So, which were still not super cheap, but obviously more cheap than they are now.
So I don't
even remember what jujubes actually are. Is that like a soft candy or a hard candy? Do you know?
Yeah, apparently Bradley has seen the episode and is coming in now.
Cool.
So this is what good stalling does for you. So
yeah. Well, that's good because as soon as he comes in, we can pretty much turn it over to him for his thoughts. Since I think we've, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we both pretty much said what we have to say about it.
Yeah, fantastic.
Hey.
Great timing, Bradley.
Did I miss anything?
No, we've basically done all the filling. So what did you think of this episode?
So I'm looking at the scenes, and I'm hoping I was watching the right one.
So what happened in the episode that you saw?
Was it about the bride who died the night before wedding day?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just making sure. Because it seemed I don't know, because there wasn't much that played into previous episodes, or at least like the last episode, maybe the last two episodes. There wasn't much of that in this episode, so since there's normally some sort of reference to like the previous episode or the episode before that, and there wasn't like much of that in this episode. So I sort of wondered about the if I had maybe watched that episodes out of order, but I guess it was the right episode anyway. So that was one of my criticisms could be that you know, and with all of the stuff that's going on with Shepard and Lewis and Shepard, and there was some stuff with Ballard and Falzone in the episode. But
yeah, I mentioned actually earlier that it seems like that this episode was probably filmed earlier than some of the ones that have already aired, because when they showed the board, they showed like it was the very first of the year.
Yeah.
And we've already had cases during '99, so it even though, I mean, we're watching them in the order that they was the production order, but it may have been originally intended to air, you know, earlier, or at least it was set earlier in the year than the other ones, because it was like the first case of January.
Yeah, that's what it felt like to me. It felt like it was the episode didn't really belong where it was in the sequence of episodes. So I'm glad it wasn't just my own brain just being, I don't know. So I mean, it was a good enough episode, I think. Besides the fact that you know, it seemed out of place, and I guess it just sort of is. But in terms of the actual episode, I very much enjoyed the sort of unsolved cases are always nice because in police procedurals, because it doesn't really emphasize that, you know, you don't always get an ending. So, you know, sometimes you get a good ending, sometimes you get a bad ending, sometimes you don't get an ending at all. And that this isn't, I think this is my first homicide non-conclusion.
And it therefore makes all the other episodes better because it adds that doubt that you don't know going in that all the cases will be closed. Because you've got that doubt. Because it's established that not all cases have to be closed. You're then watching it as an audience member thinking, oh, maybe this is a case that won't get closed. Whereas with other series, you know, oh, it always gets closed.
Well, I mean, it depends on like your well, yes and no, because the thing about unfortunately, because there have been so many of these shows now, the sort of shock factor of things not concluding isn't really new to me. So you know, it wasn't like a huge like oh my goodness, what's happening? They didn't figure out what's going to happen. Or what had happened. They didn't figure out, you know, who did it. They didn't figure out what happened to this woman. But so that sort of I guess it didn't really affect me as strongly as it might have, but I did enjoy it nonetheless. It was the one thing that they don't normally do is they don't go to the family and the friends and tell them that we're not gonna we're going to suspend the case. That doesn't really happen that often, so that was nice to see. And the one surprise was that when G told Bayless and Ballard, you know, to tell someone has to tell the family. I didn't know how it was going to be received by them, but you know, I didn't know if they were going to talk amongst themselves. You know, if are we really ready to give this up, or does one of us have to tell the family? And it wasn't really done on screen, and it's assumed that they just sort of, you know, suck it up and go talk to them from the lack of you know, they exchanged looks, so it wasn't any verbal communication. Let's see. So that was the end of the episode. I'm trying to think about it. I watched this episode sort of early in the week, so I'm sort of trying to remember what happened in the episode. Oh, I thought the I thought the casting was I was a huge fan of the casting in terms of the the temporary actors they just get into filling the story. I wasn't too impressed. And
Yeah,
sorry, go on.
they weren't great, but better than what you get on a lot of British television.
Maybe.
They weren't like standout parts, but they were okay. But I get what you're getting at, yeah, because we're used to other episodes have had better guest parts, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I think so
thought
too.
the guy who played the fiance could have been a little bit better. I don't think I mean, he wasn't a bad actor, but it just seemed like, I don't know, maybe that was part of what I said earlier. I felt like there was something sort of missing, and maybe that was part of it, that he didn't seem that compelling.
Yeah, like and same with the ex who I guess there's only sort of one ex in the guy who's wearing the gray sweater, I guess. I didn't really get I mean, you weren't really expected to get anything from him really, because he's sort of non-significant to her life. But I don't know. There's a certain amount of there's a certain amount of, I think, apathy that I got from the actor that wasn't it felt like it didn't quite fit. And that's just sort of how I feel about it. I can't really I don't really have like an expected level that he's supposed to show, but it did sort of strike me the sort of his attitude to her, I don't know, was a bit too indifferent, I think. But that's not really it didn't quite, it didn't buy, it didn't ruin or make the episode for me. So it's just sort of an observation. Anything else?
Oh, Bradley, have you seen Psycho, Citizen Kane, Maltese Falcon, Casablanca?
Citizen Kane, yes. Casablanca, yes. Maltese Falcon, no. And what was the first one?
Psycho.
No, I've only seen Citizen Kane and Casablanca.
Yeah, so maybe they could have edited it differently, where I would have done it as... It might have been a little bit meta, though, where it says... I maybe would have bleeped it out. It's like, to show, like... And then maybe put a subtitle, aren't we considerate, unlike this guy?
I see.
Yeah, but it's not goofy, Ben.
Yeah.
I almost forgot the Shepard investigation with the guy who's ruining the movies. Yeah, I thought that was a good sort of side thing to where because there wasn't much going on with the original with the main case, there wasn't much going on because there wasn't much evidence. So the movie thing did I mean, I thought it was entertaining. It's a bit, I don't know, it's always that sort of it wasn't honest accident sort of story. It's one of those things which is very real, but also we talked a few times about like an unsatisfactory ending but a realistic ending, and I think yeah, I mean, trying to help your business, and he basically got poisoned, right? So yeah, I mean, I guess it's realistic.
Yeah, I said
Apparently,
earlier that there's kind of a recurring theme with Homicide of like things don't always turn out the way you want them to or expect them to, and we have an episode like this where the case of the guy who most people aren't too broken up about him being dead because he was obnoxious and nobody liked him. He seemed didn't have family or whatever. His case is solved right away. But then the case of the woman who's well loved by all these people, then they can't solve her case. So it's kind of a bleak situation.
Yeah.
But they had like the good news of G becoming a grandfather to put a little bit more light into it.
Yeah, and that was probably my favorite scene. Was that exchange of Mike and his father.
Oh yeah, I like the look of discontent that he held for like a straight minute before deciding, okay, I guess I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah.
So you can hug me now. Yeah, that was amusing. Yeah, but that was that was sort of my impression of the episode. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it. It was just sort of there.
I would pretty much agree with that.
Mhm.
I when you talked about like cases not being solved, and Ben said something about you're wondering whether it's going to be. I remember thinking probably when I first watched this something like I thought it was going to end up being the fiance that somehow did it, because that would have been what NYPD Blue would have done.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like with them, it's always like they'd introduce somebody who's like seems like a little too suspicious, but then they find somebody else who's like, okay, this is probably going to be the suspect, and then it ends up being the first person. That happens so many times.
Yeah.
Like the guy that was originally the suspicious one, turns out he really is the one that did it. But so, like I said earlier, before you were here, like I can respect the fact that they went with they don't even know whether it was murder or suicide, much less who did it if somebody murdered her. That's a realistic thing, and it's good to have. But at the same time, it still kind of left me feeling there wasn't a lot to it. That there should have been more angles, pursued in some way. But yeah, there was a little bit, her saying we're putting the investigation aside. I don't know if I would say that if I was a police detective to the victim's fiance. Like, it's one thing to say, where we don't have any new information on the case. We'll let you know if there is anything. But having that kind of like, just flat out saying we're putting this aside is probably something I wouldn't say.
Jeff, have we? This might have already happened, and I've just forgotten it. But have we had an example of a case where we had an open ending, an unclosed case, and then maybe a season later, or a few episodes later, or maybe more seasons later, we actually new evidence came up, and they were able to close a case?
Yes, at least twice that I can think of. And I won't go into details on that in case Bradley gets around to seeing those episodes. But one of my favorites, I'll just, without spoiling it too much, one of my favorites was the one, I think it was from season 4, but it might have been 5, where the little girl remembers the name tag on the guy, or his name was written on his shirt, and after all that time is able to solve the case. So it was good for a couple of reasons. One, it was a touching scene, the way, because it was her father that had gotten killed, and then, but it was also great that they not only brought back that case and the guy, but also, it was a mention of a detective that wasn't with them anymore. He had died, so it was like it all came back in that one part. So I thought it was really well done. That was the one where Lewis was. He started out he was hitting on the woman that was that had like the new device that was supposed to be like a better lie detector or whatever it was supposed to be.
Oh yeah.
And so it showed, I think, not only the acting range of Clark Johnson, but also the range character-wise of Lewis. And then you saw both sides of the ISFP in that episode, because you saw the kind of the SP audacity where he's hitting on the woman, but then his heartfelt side comes in when it's talking to the girl about about Cressetti and about her father and all that. So
Well, that's SFPs for you.
Yeah. all
One
that
moment they're hitting on you, the next they're being sympathetic.
Yeah.
Oh yes, so Brad, you mentioned things feeling slightly out of order. Do you think though that the Ballard and Falzone relationship was in order though? Wasn't?
No, even that felt out of order to me. Like that was the only indication that the episode might have been in the correct order. But in terms of like where in the trajectory of their relationship, it felt like she's suddenly gone cold on him for no reason.
Yeah, there wasn't really
So-
that much explanation as to what, other than her saying something about, you were like this on your big case, and she doesn't even say which case that was, so we're just left to kind of guess which one she's talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
So
he's handled a few big cases.
yeah, so it might be that this episode was moved around.
Yeah, like I said, not in production, but it may have just been in terms of that it's the setting is a little bit earlier because we've seen more names on the board, and then it was like this was the very beginning of '99. So
Yeah,
It
it
was,
doesn't look very wintry though.
true.
But it might have been made a few months. Might have been made October or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's the disadvantage of shooting in the real Baltimore as opposed to on Hollywood lots where you can simulate the seasons.
I mean, a lot of times, Bradley, they're able to get people from Baltimore who are just regular people, and they have such a good casting director that they can get people who convincingly act. And usually it's of a distressed relative.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Interesting.
Am I right about that, Jeff? Did they get a lot of people who were like amateur actors, people off the street to act? And was there a problem with the acting union over that?
I mean, I don't think that most of the speaking roles were, but occasionally maybe. But there were a lot of local actors, I think, because when you are not in like New York or L.A., then you're not going to get the typical people showing up because they're not there. So when you do a casting call, you obviously not. It's not the usual crop of people in those cities, so you're going to have people that some of the people there may be like Baltimore theater actors or things like that.
Yeah. And it's East Coast, so they're probably going to have a theatre tradition. Right. I think I'll give this episode about 7 out of 10. Which is almost like my default score. If it's not, if it's not too boring, not too annoying, and it sort of like goes along, and there was that thing, that mystery element, well, not so much mystery element of, are they going to actually close this or not? And then it was sort of like counterpointed by the other two stories. And we got a little bit of an insight into Ballard. So,
That's right. Yeah.
oh yeah, so Bradley, you've not seen much of her. What do you think about her type and the fact that when she talked about, and do you think the way she talked about not wanting to be married, did that throw any light on her type, like, or anything like that, or not definitive enough?
I mean that alone, I don't think was very definitive. I will say that because there are so many SJs, I'm very, very much lazy when it comes to type spotting them. So it's sort of like I throw everyone under ISTJ until proven otherwise. Because I'm just that lazy, just like, so many. I'll figure it out. I feel like I don't have to put that much attention into it because they're all so similar. Not to say that STJs and SFJs are the same, because they're definitely not. But it's one of those things which becomes more apparently obvious, and I don't really have to try that hard to differentiate the two.
Oh, you mentioned Kelly Thorne being a good actress. It was one of those things. I looked in one of those, and I think she is a good actress. But I think though you mentioned like a comedy thing that she was in, and I watched it, and it seems like she wasn't taking the role entirely seriously and was like too much going for the comedy. And I think she needs to take things a bit more seriously. I mean, it was one of those things where it was generally regarded as the thing wasn't well written. And sometimes in that situation, actors and actresses can like try too hard to lift the material.
What comedy was this that you saw?
I can't remember. It was like, it sort of started with like her in like an analyst's office or something. And she looked a little bit older in the episode, like in her 40s. It's something more recent.
I will say that I'm not sure. Like I called her. I think last time we talked about her being another thing. We said she was naturally funny, which I think is true.
Yeah. Yep.
But in terms of her expecting to be, in terms of her, being funny on the spot, I don't think she's very good at that. I think because she's just naturally playing to her strengths and spontaneously reacting without being expected to be funny. She's naturally funny in that way.
Yeah, I think she was forcing it a little bit in that show because it was like something that was supposed to be a comedy that didn't naturally have a lot. And I just think, Jeff, you may have experienced this. Have you seen some things where the script is so bad, where you've seen the actors like trying too hard to like put their own jokes and things in?
Yeah, there were some Blake 7 episodes like that.
Oh well. There were also some ones there were also ones he liked, folks.
Oh yeah.
All right. So I'll also give this episode 7 out of 10. Because I think it's like not good, not bad, just sort of there. I will say the last 7 out of 10 is because I basically docked points from the episode, but this 7 out of 10 is just sort of a plain 7, like plus 0, no subtracting, no adding points for anything, just sort of 7.
What about you, Jeff? Are you going to knock a point off for the Giardello Mike being involved when he shouldn't have been? Oh, anyway, I shouldn't be saying this. It's over to you, Jeff. Sorry.
I didn't really, do it that way, but I also gave it a 7. So it's time to go to Vegas because we got 3 7s. So play the slot machine. So we all gave it a 7. Join us next week for a Law and Order episode because it's time for the final crossover. So we have starts on Law and Order and ends on Homicide. So join us for part 1 of Sideshow.
Bye-bye, folks. I'm going to end it.
Bye.
Right.